Have you ever looked at your dog and wondered what is really going on in that head? Whether they are reading your mood, predicting your next move, or building up their best puppy eyes to score some treats. There's so much more happening behind those eyes than we think. You are not alone, and that is exactly what we're diving into on today's Tails and Tones. But before we get into that, I would love for you to go and hit that follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with real talk, helpful tips, and heartwarming stories from our dog-loving community. You can also join our newsletter. Just head on over to the link on our Instagram bio at Tails and Tones for updates and extras delivered straight to your inbox. Alrighty, let's dig in. Hi there and welcome to Tails and Tones. I'm your host, Mariska Nell, also known as Piper's mom, and we are joined today by an amazing guest, Jennifer Holland. She has probably met more fascinating creatures, human and otherwise, than almost anyone I know. Jennifer is a science journalist, author, and storyteller who was a longtime staff writer at National Geographic, reporting from some of the wildest and most beautiful corners of our planet. She is the best-selling author of Unlikely Friendship series and her latest book, Dog Smart: Life-Changing Lessons in Canine Intelligence, examining what it means to be smart in the world of a dog. Please give a awesome welcome to our guest today, Jennifer Holland. And Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is amazing having you on the podcast. Like, honestly, your book has been amazing. Like, there were so many times while I was cooking and listening to the audiobook, and I was like, hang on, I did not know that. And then I would stop everything, run to my husband and be like, did you know, like, dogs can do this? And he was like, oh my gosh, what are you reading? So
I love it.
it was your book and absolutely love it. But for our listeners that maybe have not heard about your book or your series of books, Jennifer, who are you and what do you do? Give us a little bit of a snip.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a science writer. I have worked many years at National Geographic and written for lots of other publications. My interest has always been animals and conservation and the natural world. And my first books, I did a series. The first book was called Unlikely Friendships, and it was kind of true stories of odd animal pairs that really kind of took off unexpectedly. It was a lot of fun to have people react so wonderfully to the book. So there were 3 books after that in the same vein because that one was so popular. And then eventually I came around to wanting to do something a little more sciencey, a little bit more of a through point, rather than sort of these individual stories. And so I turned to our favorite animal, our pets, our dogs, and worked on Dog Smart, which is my most recent book.
I love that. And like, kind of, where did this curiosity for like animals first began with you?
I've always had it. I think it was just out of the womb. My mom used to joke about my DNA was woven with dog hair or something silly like that. And I always had a really, really strong compassion for animals and love for animals and a desire to be around them. And I was really fortunate that my work has kind of let me do that while also writing, which is my other passion. But yeah, I've always loved them. I volunteer, to work with dogs, and I've had a lot of pets over the years and just really have a special relationship with animals.
I love that. And that's amazing. And talking about like kind of unique friendships, like fun fact, our audience, we used to have a parrot. It was my sister's parrot. It was a son conure. I honestly believe till this day that that was a demon bird. He would attack everything, but
Oh,
he
yeah.
loved my sister dearly, so he was always with her. He slept with her in the bed. Like, it was, a pair
Wow.
like none other. And even the cat was so afraid of this little bird. It
Yeah.
was so funny. And he would like sometimes if you sit on my sister's bed, he would just like kind of walk all this like, oh, I'm so sassy. And then the
I
next moment he goes in full on
I
attacked
do.
mode. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we
Birds.
lived with a very weird, strange couple. So I'm excited to also hear more about some of those strange
Yeah.
things in your book as well. And
Absolutely.
I mean, you've honestly spent your entire life kind of translating the science part because, a lot of the times it like goes woof, it just goes over our heads. And,
Yeah.
you kind of translated that into something that is actually understandable for the majority of people. And, underneath it all, what was kind of when you looked at your most recent book with Dog Smart, what was that kind of question that you felt, I'm trying to answer this with this book, looking from the science, looking from the storytelling? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, in part, there was always kind of a question about when people do research on animals, dogs were often not involved. It was always about wild animals, which makes a lot of sense for certain kinds of research. But, people don't think of dogs as being real. They're this sort of construct that we've created in some way. And are they a relevant animal to study and understand because of that? And so my feeling was absolutely, they fill a really special niche. And in a way that makes them more interesting to me because they do have this, this relationship with humans that's evolved over thousands of years. They have, incredible adaptive intelligence, just their ability to fit in, whether they are pets or living on the streets, as the majority of dogs do. And I guess I just kind of wanted to really look at that. And also, I think understanding dogs helps us look at ourselves a little bit too, and so part of the book too was about, how do we relate to dogs and how do we think about them and appreciate them, and what are things
Mhm.
we could maybe do better to let them be dogs more, sort of let them be the
Yeah,
animals that they are and not just our pets. So those are some things
exactly.
I think I had in
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
And I mean, that was something really fascinating for me in your book when, you kind of start off and you hear about how many of these like stray dogs or street dogs or however you refer to it in your
Yeah.
country. And I was like, wow, this is I didn't think about that. And, in a lot of countries, when you kind of see stray dogs, you're like, oh, this should be in a rescue or, we
Uh-huh.
should like kind of take care of them. And it was really fascinating how, you kind of told that story also about, the woman that kind of, when there was fireworks and stuff, then the dogs would be like, hi, can we snuggle in your house
Yeah.
tonight? And then the next day it's like off,
Yeah.
so it is really interesting. So how did you come about like kind of that study as well?
That was a big eye opener for me too. I didn't realize that, something like 85% of dogs are not pets. And
Wow.
and it kind of, I read some studies, kind of from way back really, that looked at the idea of whether dogs that live on their own like that, is that a legitimate life for a dog. And I just, as a dog lover, my first instinct too is to save them all and get them off the street. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what a horrible life they lead. But what I came to understand a little bit more is just that there is a niche that dogs have filled in the world on the streets. And it's a tough life, but it is a life. And they are
Yeah.
100% dogs when they're living that life. They're not, abiding by our rules. They're taking advantage of things as they come. They're total opportunists. And that did have me sort of rethink. I mean, it's still hard for me to see, it's heartbreaking to see dogs that are, three-legged and struggling on the streets or whatever. But I do appreciate a little bit more that isn't necessarily a wrong life for them. Um,
Yeah.
we have to be aware, of course, they can cause problems, and if they carry disease and if they're attacking, chickens and people's livelihoods, that's an issue. And I certainly appreciate that as well. But yeah, I just give them a little bit more credit for the many lives that they lead, including the harder looking ones that we might, be afraid of otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, wow. No, that is so interesting. And I mean, coming back to like the smart dogs, I honestly believe that our dog is the smartest, like Frenchie.
Of
She
course. I
is
don't think
like,
that.
the bee's knees, and
Mhm.
obviously just love her to bits. And like we had this kind of moment where, she like, and it was kind of after I read one of the chapters from Dog Smart, and I kind of, we went on a walk, and all of the sudden I almost got this glimpse of her thinking and not
Mhm.
just reacting.
Yeah.
So yeah, have you had that like same kind of moments when, a dog's mind is kind of just like revealed itself to you in a way that made you stop in your tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more I'm looking for it, the more I'm seeing it too, is just watching. I'm watching dogs much more closely when I meet them, watching their body language, seeing what are they, after in this relationship? What are they sniffing? What are they seeing? But even, with my own dogs, and I tell the one story in the book about my dog kind of figuring out how to navigate in, kind of a relationship with our other dog who was a bit of a bully, and so, our one dog Monk kind of figured out how to get the coveted spot on the bed by really tricking Getty, our other dog, to get down. And I watched him do that. And the first time he did it, I thought, oh, that's just sort of a coincidence, but he really figured out that it worked. And then I would see him do it again. And I realized that he thought that through. He figured out something that worked,
Wow.
and then he did it again. And so that sort of helped me again sort of see a different version of thinking on their part, something that you might not think that a dog does very well.
Exactly. And I mean, there's so many signs that you can kind of look for with dogs,
Mhm.
and I mean, like things that they do when they do want treats. So our dog actually use the talking buttons.
Oh yeah.
And I honestly believe she is very smart, and she's now
Uh-huh.
on 12 buttons.
That's
And
important.
my husband, on the other hand, believe that she just gets attention when she pressed the button. So he's still in like, you know, I'm not sure whether
I'm
he
sure.
believes she can talk.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is really interesting. Like she loves the ball button. So she will wake up, run to the buttons and press that ball
I love
button, and she smacks the hell out of it.
that. Mhm.
And then we have a now and later as well. And the like if you wait a little bit too long to come, she would be like, now,
Wow.
now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so and then she does have like a love you button. So the love you button is like when we do cuddle and kiss. And like, yeah, like you can see like sometimes if I'm having a bit of a tough day, and sometimes she'll press that, and then I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
he's so sweet."
that is nice.
and and yeah,
Regardless
so
of what he knows, that's just nice.
exactly. And I mean, you mentioned Bunny in your book
Mhm.
for the talking buttons.
Yeah.
So what do you kind of make about this kind of communication and like the research? Because obviously, with some of these button talking dogs, there's a lot of research on them now.
Mhm.
Yeah, how is this actually making communication easier? Or, yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I kind of see it as it's communication that's a little different. It doesn't replace in any way, I think the kinds of communications that we should have with our dogs that are more dog forward, by learning their body language and responding appropriately, thinking about what makes sense for a canine versus a primate. But I see no problem with it, and I think it's great fun, and I certainly think these dogs understand cause and effect. They know, if I push this I get that. I mean, that's very clear. What they know about the concept of love, it's harder to say, but I don't, it doesn't bother me at all to kind of assume a little bit beyond, what we really know, and there's no reason to think that they don't feel affection for us. I think we can see that. It's pretty obvious how they feel to some degree, and it's not always a scientific study that proves it, but I completely believe that we do, have pretty good instincts when it comes to how dogs are feeling, and that we can learn that just from, observing them and being part of their lives. But I
Yeah.
think buttons are fun. I wished my dogs would do it. They weren't interested. So I was
it
unfortunate.
it took some bribing to get used to, and like I we still emphasize a lot of
Oh,
words. So when, I do go and we're going to go to the park, I would specify park. We're going to the
mhm.
park.
Yep.
And, we like, especially when we used to live in Australia, we used to go to the coffee shop and I would say coffee, and then she would
Mhm,
be like, yes, we're going there, it's going to be fun. So
mhm.
I'm going to believe she's understanding me. We're in sync. So
Yeah, and you
we'll take
wonder,
that.
like, when you say coffee, it would be so interesting to know, does she picture the coffee shop? Does she smell the coffee? Like,
Yeah,
what is it that her brain does to alert her to what that word means? And we don't really
exactly.
quite get that, but they could probably do some studies with MRIs, and figure out what part of the
Yeah.
brain is lighting up and maybe answer some of those questions.
Exactly. And talking about MRI, so you actually also mentioned that in your book
Yeah.
where, if I go into an MRI machine, I'm like, ooh, and they actually trained dogs to go in these MRI machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, just share a little bit about that because were you there seeing some of these things as well, how they did that?
Yeah, so I got to watch them do sort of a sample. They kind of showed me, a dog doing it that was in training, and it's really, like training a dog for anything. It's kind of a step by
Oh,
step with reward, and for them, the idea of being in this thing that scares all of us. It doesn't necessarily bring the same fear, but I think, as long as they're rewarded and they see it as a good idea, they were very comfortable with it. And they trained many, many dogs to do it. And they understood to sit still, which is the key
mm,
in an MRI. If you're moving around, it's not gonna be a useful result. But they've,
exactly.
had a very, very good outcome with dogs being trained to get up in there, to lie down properly, to wear earphones, and
Wow.
just to lie very, very still during the test. And it gives them, a window on dogs that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
I love that. That's amazing. And I mean, Jennifer, you have honestly spent more than a decade, observing the wildest of animals for like National Geographic. And, so obviously coming back to like dogs, our best friends, what is it that kind of dogs have taught you that even the wildest of creatures just couldn't?
Yeah. I think part of it is about um just this, again, this sort of adaptability idea. I think, because dogs are in these two worlds, their own world and our world, in a way that really no other animal, I mean, cats come close, but they're a very different creature. um, there is just something amazing about how dogs have found their way, have, whether it's opportunism or whatever, they've figured us out, and they know, how to get the best out of us, how to get the best lives out of us. And at the same time are incredibly forgiving. The fact that we don't always get it right with them, and that they just come back for more love. And it was just really neat to see that sort of back and forth between humans and dogs, and to observe it more closely, and try to understand a little better where we can improve, and what dogs really need. I think is another thing that I've really learned from this, is just to,
Mm,
again, appreciating that dogs have needs that we don't always allow them to
mm,
fill, and to think about more, how we can let them fill those needs. It doesn't really offend us or bother, it doesn't have to be a big problem to let dogs be dogs. We just have to give them
mm,
that time and space.
mm. And I think that is so important. And also that like understanding what is our dog saying to us.
Mhm.
And one of the things that really struck me with your book was also looking at how dogs actually rely on the body language of other dogs.
Oh yeah.
So we just had a run in like in the last 2 weeks with a like a pit bull. She was only
Mhm.
5 months old, but her ears were clipped.
Mhm.
And so the moment I saw that, I obviously being remembered from your book, I was like, hang on, she does not have the ear signals. So what do I do? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, she shouldn't really kind of mingle with Piper because I'm scared, like, she doesn't have the ear signals. So obviously it is something like, a lot of people still clip the ears. They still, clip the tails, even though
Yeah.
in some countries it is illegal. You can't do that anymore. Um, but like a dog like Piper and most of our dogs, they won't be able to read all the signals that this
That's right.
dog is giving.
That's right.
So, how do we challenge, something like that, or, or how do we handle this challenge of,
Um,
helping our dog to actually be able to communicate, or how do we step up for them in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think it's great to be aware as you are of, that this does affect their communication. There's a
Mm,
lot of redundancy, I'm sure too. Dogs can, if something's missing, they're, going to look at the body language in other ways. And there are so many signals. That was, I think a little mind blowing to me too, was just how robust their communication is and how many different versions of body language there are and the different growls that mean different things and just there's just such subtlety in their ability to communicate that they catch and that we miss probably for the most part and they catch it in us too, I think.
yeah,
But I think, yeah, awareness of that, if the ears are done and the tail is clipped and all of that, that this dog has fewer tools, natural tools to communicate and just being really, I mean, we should always be aware and thoughtful when our dogs are
yeah,
interacting with other dogs. But I think just, yeah, noticing that that is something that might change a little bit about how those two dogs interact. There might be something, a cue that's missing that would be
yeah.
important. And it's better to be safe and just sort of step back rather than sort of see how it goes.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So for me, that was like kind of heartbreaking because he was still a puppy, like 5 months old. And I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, you can't communicate. Like it
Well,
reminded me almost like the lonely whale that, signals at a
yeah,
different.
yeah,
And I was like, oh
exactly.
my
That's
gosh,
right.
this is
That's right.
heartbreaking. Why would you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, you have honestly spoken to so many different scientists, to different trainers all over the world. And, obviously we've talked about the MRI study as well. But has there been like a study or a moment that just kind of gave you that goosebumps, something that made you like rethink what dogs are capable of?
There were probably a lot of them. I think there were moments in the field where just seeing a dog do the thing that it does was just, a reminder that, wow, that is an incredible. For example, going out, I went out with a woman, her two boxers who are trained for search and rescue. And we did, she had her dad come and he went off and walked through the woods in a very meandering way. And then
Wow.
she asked her dogs to find him. And to just watch them catch that scent and follow, this weird meandering trip that he took, and we could see on a Google map or something where he had walked, and then we got to see where the dog followed. And it was remarkable the way that they pick up this scent and know that it's not quite as strong over there, and that's how they know to turn this way. And eventually, of course, we made it to the guy, and he was sitting there on a rock, and they were excited to see him. But it was just one of those, actually
Yeah.
seeing them do it and succeed was really amazing. But then in terms of studies, you know, one of the most amazing things was probably the folks at Auburn University who were studying, how much of a concentration of a scent does a dog need to be able to detect it? And they were
Wow.
talking about in the billionths, the trillionths, maybe even the quadrillionths in concentration, just the tiniest speck of an amount of a scent. And that's how these dogs that can find, buried bodies that have been there for 200 years.
Wow.
And, they just need a little tiny bit of something, and if they're trained to know that that's the scent they're looking for, they can alert to that. And it's just incredible how different their sensory apparatus are compared to ours, and how different that life they lead is because of it.
Exactly. Oh, it's fascinating. And I mean, there has been dogs in your book that actually detect cancer.
Yeah.
And not to give too much away from your book, you guys need to go and read it because it just had so many aha moments. But yeah, so I mean, dogs detecting cancer. You've just mentioned about, the dogs finding missing people and also like the bodies and stuff, like the cadaver dogs. And, like all of that is so fascinating. And it kind of puts these dogs as like these genius dogs.
Right.
But,
Right.
when we look at our own little dogs looking back at us from that window or the door when we see them every day, what does that genius look like to you?
It looks like love. That's a good question. I my the dog we have right now, we're down to one, which is very hard for me, but we have our one old man monk left right now,
Oh.
and he's a very smart dog in that, he's not the dog that's always sitting in your lap. He's kind of independent, but he comes around when he wants to be. And you can see that he has figured out what he needs, and he's very good at it. And he has created a life for himself that works. And you don't think of that necessarily as intelligence, but again, I think that that sort of ability to problem solve and to make whatever your circumstances are as good as possible, and that adaptability is really a form of intelligence. And then the emotional intelligence, the fact that we do have a relationship, and he does seem to understand when I'm down or when I need something. That's when he's going to come around. And I've seen many dogs do this when I
Yeah.
traveled around to some of the comfort dog situations, and just to see all these different kinds of intelligence, the communicative intelligence, the emotional, the olfactory. You can kind of watch for it in your own dogs and see little moments of brilliance, so to speak. They may or may not know the names of all the toys, but they have all of these other forms of intelligence that I think we don't always appreciate.
I love that. And I mean, through your book, I really realized that, I kind of felt, okay, I do a lot for Piper, but I was like, wow, these people, like, especially those puppies, they do all sorts of things when they're like 1 day old and then they start,
Um,
getting them used to stuff. So I definitely think there is so much that we can do to give our dogs really like the best chance of succeeding and
yeah.
doing all of these things. And I mean, you get different type of dogs. You get, obviously the working dogs and
Yeah.
like the canine dogs. And for each one, you can't really treat them the same. But what I've noticed a lot, and we have such a big problem here where we are, of people, just giving up on dogs and
Um,
saying, this is like a bad dog. I can no longer, or, they go on a 3-month holiday and decide it's better to get rid of the dog than, keeping it. So it's really, really heartbreaking. And I mean, you've spent some time with those trainers actually rehabilitating some of these so-called bad dogs,
mhm.
after seeing their transformations and things like that. Do you think like this bad behavior can sometimes just be misdirected intelligence?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to say it. And I think that's probably very common that this dog is not getting what it needs to use its cognitive skills, its physical skills, whatever, probably both in those cases. And that it's not deliberately disobeying, or it's not deliberately
Mm,
being aggressive or anything. There's always a reason. And
yeah.
sometimes I think we just assume it's too much work to try to figure out what this
Mm,
is, or I can't train this dog. The dog's untrainable. It's like, well, no,
mm,
it's just probably you're not training it properly. And different dogs may need different techniques, but in general, dogs learn much like we do, and it takes time to train them, and we owe it to them to train them, because if we don't, they don't know what's expected of them. And so these dogs that aren't trained, and then people sort of throw their hands up, it's like, well, that was sort of your doing. I hate to say it, because you didn't do what that dog needed from you, and now you're
yeah.
expecting it to respond properly, and it doesn't know what you need and what you want. So it's a tough one, and there are dogs out there, I'm sure, that are, a small percentage that can't be rehabilitated, that have just
Mm,
are damaged, and that's terribly sad. But I know there are groups out there and trainers out there who will do everything they can to bring a dog back and to bring that
yeah.
trust back. And they're often very successful because they know how to approach the dog and how to work with it.
Well, I mean, that's really fascinating and so good to hear that, so if you do struggle with your dog, you're going through a trainer and you're not getting those breakthroughs, don't give up. Like,
Right, right.
find another trainer, find another method, like, yeah, just find other options because there's loads. I mean, and read your book, like go through that.
Mm,
Maybe,
thank
you
you.
can get some tips in there as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And I do
like
want
kind
to
of,
emphasize, like,
yeah,
I think, just on that note really quickly, that exercise is so key to this. And a lot of people who have problems with their dogs simply are not giving them enough exercise. And that's cognitive,
yeah.
physical too. I mean, dogs need to run, they need to get all that out. And if they don't, they're going to tear up chew on your table leg and tear up the trash. So, again, if you see that behavior, it's probably something as simple as just giving them more time to exercise outdoors and to play and do things that they need to do.
Yeah, and I mean, like for us, I know if I don't take Piper for like her walk in the mornings,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not gonna get anything done at work
That's right.
for at least, until 1 p.m. when she's like, okay, I've had enough with the ball. I've like,
Mhm.
barked so many times. So I know that's crucial for us. And it actually happened today because, she had to go for physio. So I thought, okay, I know she's got physio. So I don't want to go, have her do a walk and then like an hour session of physio. That's a lot. So,
Mhm.
yeah. And then I was like, oh my gosh, now she's like very active and hyper. So, and I know that's on me because we didn't go for our walk. Maybe we should have just like, done something a little bit simpler. So it's definitely
Mm.
things like that that we need to take, responsibility for as well. Cause it's not like, your dog's going to grab the leash and be like, okay, I'm taking myself for a walk. I see you
Right.
busy,
Right.
kind of thing. So
If only they could.
if only, I wonder what they would do if they,
Yeah.
have carte blanche on their walk without supervision. But yeah, once we kind of, understand this like super intelligent and also emotional, complex like dogs, what is kind of our responsibility? What kind of responsibility is there for us as like pet parents, but also, like you as like storytellers? What is our responsibility?
I think some of the things we talked about, just giving them exercise, and cognitive exercise, being, I think, if you have a breed of dog, being aware of what that breed normally, they have tendencies. I mean, not every dog is going to be the same, but there are going to be things that if you get a border collie, you can expect certain kinds of behaviors and certain needs that need to be filled. And if you don't fill them, again, you're going to have problems with the dog. And then just the simple things I talk about in the book, letting them sniff, because that's how they learn. That's their
Mm,
main source of information, is the nose. And if you're pulling your dog along because you don't have time, and or their nose is in something that kind of looks gross to you, it doesn't hurt us really to just give them that time, to let them. There were studies showing that dogs were more optimistic if they were allowed to sniff.
oh,
It's kind of a tricky thing to explain how they figured that out, but it just showed, that they need that. It does make them
yeah,
feel more like dogs, probably more like they're supposed to feel. So giving them all of that, and then also just, I think what we normally tend to do is give them the love you know that humans want to give too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
yeah,
hugging your dog if your dog likes to be hugged, and I think most of them, certainly the ones you see on social media, are all very happy to be ensconced in our lives and under the covers, and given all this great love that we have for them. So yeah, and there's lots of other tips in the book, I think, about just ways that we can let them exercise their dogness and then also
yeah.
be part of our lives at the same time.
I also feel it's so important, that you kind of communicate with your dog as well.
Hmm.
So Piper knows when we go on safari, it's her time.
Hmm.
And she's allowed to sniff, she's allowed to go. I will go wherever she wants to. But she also knows that we can't sniff for hours.
Right.
So when she is like sniffing for quite a few moments, and I'm like, okay, we gotta go. And then I start counting three, two,
Good.
one. And
Hmm.
when she like gets to one, she's like, oh, okay. let's
Yeah.
go. Like I
Mhm.
know I've done my sniff, and I think it's like little cues like that instead of
Mhm.
just like constantly, because I never have to pull her.
Mhm.
When we get to one, it's like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
That's a
here.
great way
And
to
then
do it.
maybe, yeah. And then
Mhm.
maybe like 2 feet further, she's like, oh, the scent
Not
here, it's
again.
nice.
I do
So
catch myself doing things and I'm thinking, this is not what I would have told myself in my book. I need to not do this. This is embarrassing. Conflict of interest
yeah.
here. I need to be a
So
better parent too.
exactly. So, I mean, some days, obviously, you don't have the 5 hours that your
Sure.
dog think, Safari needs to take. And we only are limited to time. But yeah, so it's like navigating that, which is really interesting, sometimes challenging, but,
Right.
you kind of make the best of it. And I think, again, that communication, like maybe say, we're going on a safari, or this is a walk, this is
Mhm.
like we gotta go to work walk.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I mean it's so interesting. Jennifer, you've explored like the natural world, you've explored, the wild to like the living room kind of things. What would you say is kind of one truth about the intelligence and like the connection that you now believe more deeply than ever?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think this is it's sort of an old trope that we are somehow above other animals, and certainly we do have some characteristics that allow us to dominate and to kind of be the owners and the deciders and all of that. But to me, there's sort of there's a universal, running through all of these animals. There's just intelligence and abilities and capabilities and beauty, and all of this is just so deep and so at the core of living things. And to me, to look down on any of this and feel that we have some sort of you know that we rule this domain and that it's up to us. I think we need to step back and really appreciate the roles of all of these other animals and their ability to do what they do and their existence, their value just to exist. And
Yeah.
so appreciating when we look at conservation and how can we allow these animals to thrive in the wild and that sort of thing. I really do think about they deserve to exist. It's not just a role that they play in the ecosystem or something like that. There's an existence value there that we don't always appreciate. And somehow just sort of relating to your dog and loving your dog, maybe that can help us think a little bit more about that just because we love our dogs so much.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, you
Mhm.
do kind of realize once, your dog is showing all this emotion. And like, I mean, like if I had to tell my great grandparents, we took our dog today to see a physio,
Right.
I would love to have seen their reaction, because that would have been one to definitely record, because people now do all these sorts of things, and like I never really thought about, oh wow, our dog actually has a really tense back.
Mhm.
So I know what it feels like when I have a tense back. Like, you do not want to speak to me because
Yeah.
I'm angry, I've got headaches,
Mhm.
so when I found that out, I was like, wow, no, we got to treat that. And I think it comes with this knowledge and this emotion that you share and this bond that you share. Like,
Yeah.
you probably just want to make sure your dog is healthy and happy all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. I think that's a wonderful goal. If we all did it, we'd be better off.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, so your book, honestly, like it is definitely one of my favorite books that I've read this year.
Thank
So
you.
talking to you is like really a fangirl moment at this point.
Thank you.
And I loved it so much, been recommending it to everyone. But I want to know from you, Jennifer, like when people read your book and they finish, they get to that end notes, whether they do the audible version or actually the physical book, what is that one shift in perspective that you hope that sticks with people?
I think it's kind of that let dogs be dogs law. Making that part of your relationship with your dog. It's not just about your dog is your pet. It's about you are also a partner to your dog,
Mm,
and they are a different species. They have a different experience of life. They have different needs. they're forgiving, they are, stoic, they tend to roll with it for the most part if, whatever it is that we're requiring of them. But that they are a completely different species with a different experience, and that the more we can allow that to come through, I think the better, the happier the dog is, and probably the better our relationship is with the dog. Because I think they appreciate that on some level. They get to do what they're built to do and what they evolved to do, which is partly sleep on the couch, but also, as we see from the 85% that don't do that, there are other tasks and other experiences that dogs are built to have. And I could when we can give them that, that's a really great goal.
I love that. That's amazing. And I think it's so good to give them these different experiences that,
Yeah.
we they can learn from and enjoy. And if you could leave like kind of one message in every pet parent's like heart, today, like what is your like wish for them? What would that be?
Oh, yeah, I would say I would imagine your dog appreciates all of that love in some way, and just being, continue to be there and continue to observe your dog, and I think learn your dog's needs, learn your dog's body
Hmm.
language, just be present for them so that you can give them what they need in addition to taking what they give.
Yeah, that's so important. And Jennifer, where can people actually find you? Where can our Tales and Turns community find you, your book? Yeah.
Yes. I am at jenniferhollandwriter.com. I'm also just very late to the game on social media. I am starting to do some Instagram and TikTok videos under Jennifer Holland Writes is my handle. And I would love for people to follow and comment on all that, because that's just kind of a new venture for me. And I'm still learning how to how to be a video star. I'm definitely not a star yet. But you can get the book through the website or on any of the, Amazon and bnn.com and the different ordering platforms. And also, if you're in a small bookstore, please ask for it. They may not have it, but I would love if some of the more of the small bookstores would order it, because I think it would be the kind of book that people who enjoy those shops might actually pick up and enjoy.
I love that. And also your libraries, guys. If you go
Yeah,
to the library and they don't have it,
all of them to
get,
order it. Yeah, thank you.
E- exactly. That's amazing. And I'm going to link all that up in our show notes as well. So just head on over to our website, tailsandtones.com, and you would find it there in the show notes. Everything's going to be there for you guys.
It was a lot of fun chatting, and yeah, I hope people will pick up the book and get something out of it. So
So, when it comes to truly understanding our dogs, maybe it is not just about training them, but actually learning to listen to them. So, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tales and Tones. And thank you so much to our amazing guest, Jennifer, for being on the podcast and sharing your knowledge and your experience with our audience. And if today's episode actually spoke to you, please do leave a review on podchaser.com, or if you can think of a fellow pet parent that might love this too, please do share it with them. If you've got any questions or just want to come and say hi, I'm always around on Instagram at Tails and Tones, where every tale tells a story and every tone speaks from the heart. See you in the next one.